this passage is about Western history, Western civilization, and the author's argument is what is regarded as Western civilization is actually a myth because most civilizations are interconnected. Okay, let's read the passage and look at the questions. What would Western history look like if we abandoned the myth of Western civilization? This already tells you the tone of the author. He calls Western civilization a myth. He says, what would Western history look like if we abandoned the myth of Western civilization and dug deeper to uncover historical realities? So basically, what is called Western civilization is a myth. What is the reality is something different. And what will history look like if we really looked at the realities? That's his question. We could start at the supposed birthplace of the West in the classical worlds of Greece and Rome. Let's start with what is called the birthplace of the West, classical Greece and Rome. Recent research shows that ancient Greeks didn't think of themselves as predominantly European. Indeed, the famous historian Herodotus derided the very concept of separate continents, arguing that they all belong to the same connected world. He said, let's go to Greece and Rome. Okay. First thing he said is famous historian Herodotus said, all this concept of continents is rubbish. All the world is interconnected. So that itself cuts off the concept of West. Similarly, the Romans ruled an empire that spanned 3 continents and claimed they were descendants of the Trojans of Asia. Greece, this is the case. Romans, they conquered 3 continents. They were not just kings of one. They conquered 3 continents. And they themselves called themselves descendants of Asians. Celebrating their mixed heritage, they would not have considered themselves to be white, certainly not Western. He says the Romans would have called themselves neither white nor Western. The misunderstandings accumulate after that. So this itself is a misunderstanding. There are more and more. The misunderstanding only accumulated, collected, became more and more after that. After the Roman Empire split in the late 3rd century, the western half eventually splintering into independent kingdoms, the eastern half developing into the Byzantine Empire, some elements of the classical culture were lost, some were preserved, and other transformed for a radical new world, the early Middle Ages. So what happened basically was the Roman Empire split. When the Roman Empire split, a little bit of culture was lost. Some part of the culture was preserved. Some part was transformed. And that transformation led to a totally, radically different world, the early Middle Ages, the world of the early Middle Ages. Traditional narratives cast this period, the early Middle Ages, as a dark age of backwardness and barbarism before the rebirth of classical tradition during the European Renaissance. He says traditionally, early Middle Ages were seen as dark ages, the age of barbarism before the Renaissance or rebirth, which was a cultural rebirth, cultural, scientific, literal, all kinds of things. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The author doesn't agree that early Middle Ages were dark ages. He says the evidence suggests otherwise. What does it suggest? What is the evidence that contradicts this view of early Middle Ages as dark ages? In the Eastern Mediterranean, the Byzantine Empire dazzled with splendor and sophistication. The Islamic world stretched from Seville to Samarkand, from Mosul to Mali, enjoying a period of unrivaled prosperity in addition to artistic and scientific advancement. In East Asia, the Tang dynasty transformed China, and the Buddhist Sri Vijaya Empire ushered in a golden age for the Southeast Asian archipelago. This is all that happened. Everywhere there was prosperity and all kinds, literally, cultural. This is what happened, sophistication, dazzling prosperity. What dark ages are you talking about? The author gives evidence. Moreover, while some clergy drew on scientific, especially theological thinking from antiquity, so there was scientific and theological thinking also. So while some clergy drew on these paths from antiquity, they were certainly not the only people to do so. The bloodline that we think of as Western did not flow in a single channel from Greece, Rome to the West. Instead, it spread rather chaotically in all directions. So this culture that Europe, this bloodline that Europe thinks of as linear, Greek, Roman and Western, he says it was not linear. This bloodline was chaotically spread all over, carrying the cultural inheritance of Greek and Roman antiquity to all 4 points of the compass. Okay? Take the Byzantine Empire itself. So he's giving the example. How can you say this? He's giving the example. Take the Byzantine Empire itself. Politically, the Byzantine Empire was a straightforward continuation of Eastern Roman Empire, occupying the same territories and using the same structures of governance, law, and administration. Crucially, its people never called themselves Byzantines but referred to themselves as Romans. Culturally, they drew from Greek as well as Roman traditions. They spoke Greek, and ancient Greek texts remained a standard part of their elite education. Byzantine scholars also went deep into ancient text, collating useful information of everything from cavalry tactics to advice on beekeeping and encyclopedic reference works such as the 10th century Constantinian excerpts. So Byzantine emperors did go into all these Greek and Roman texts and they built on them. Farther to the east were yet more heirs of Greek and Roman culture. Many people do not think of the Indian subcontinent as part of the Greek world, but it was. The conquests of Alexander the Great brought him as far back as the Punjab Valley in what is now called India and Pakistan. When he left, some Macedonian soldiers stayed behind, permanently settling in Bactria or modern Afghanistan. Culturally hybrid Indo-Greek kingdoms emerged in Afghanistan, Pakistan and parts of northern India. So when Alexander conquered India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, that area, there was the Greek influence in the Indian subcontinent. And what happened? Some of them stayed back. Some of his soldiers stayed back, and so Indo-Greek hybrid kingdoms were set up in this region. This Hellenistic Far East was unequivocally part of the ancient Greek world, becoming especially influential in the development of later Greek philosophy. Got it? So basically he says what we call Western is not Western. Western civilization is a myth. It is an amalgam of various cultures, because Roman Greek culture itself gave rise to a lot of culture and has taken from them. So there is no such thing as Western civilization and culture. Alright, let's look at the questions. None of the following statements is implied by the argument except. So what is the statement that is implied by the author? A majority of the population today can be called heirs of Greek and Roman. Did he say most of the population? No, he said lot. Greek and Roman heirs are all over the world. He's talking of the distribution of the heirs of Greeks and Romans, people who carry forward the inheritance. But he is not talking in terms of numbers. Most of the people are heirs of Greeks and Romans. That's not correct. Some people in Afghanistan have Greek roots that can be traced back to Alexander's conquest. Again, we can't say this for certainty. How can you say that? Yes, it's true that Alexander went to Afghanistan and some people stayed back and a lot of Indo-Greek kingdoms had started. Maybe they've all gone now. Maybe some other. The example of the Indian subcontinent and Afghanistan was given just to show how far the Greek and Roman influence had gone, right? But not necessarily that some people in Afghanistan still have. They may, but we can't say for sure. The later Middle Ages may have been a period of backwardness and barbarism. The author only talks of the early Middle Ages. We don't know anything about the later Middle Ages. It may have been, it may not have been. The author is not talking about it, so we can't say he is implying it. Byzantines incorporated elements of both Greek and Roman traditions, true, and they call themselves Romans. So the correct answer is D. Which of the following best describes the purpose of the first paragraph? What does the author say in the first paragraph? What you call the myth of Western civilization. Put it aside, let's look at the historical realities. What are the historical realities? He goes back to the birthplace of the so-called birthplace of the West, which is Greek and Roman, then goes on to talk about it, right? That the Greeks and Romans themselves don't call themselves white or Europeans. So what is the purpose of the first paragraph? To tell that there's nothing called the Western civilization, and all the facts given by the West about its roots, about its birthplace, they're all mythical, right? To undermine the concept of separate continents and emphasize it's not about separate continents that he's talking about, right? It's basically he's talking about the misunderstandings and misconceptions, the myths surrounding what is called the Western civilization. To question the notion of a predominantly European identity for ancient Greeks and Romans by presenting evidence of their diverse influence and connections to a broader world. He did not do this. He does not question what he is questioning is Western civilization and its roots in Greek and Roman culture. Right? To challenge the traditional, this is the point, the traditional concepts and narratives of Western civilization, to challenge those by pointing out that Greek and Roman culture were interconnected with other regions of the world as well. So if you call yourself if you say you're drawn from Greek and Western culture and Roman culture, you're also connected to other regions of the world, right? Therefore, the correct answer is C. Instead, it spread rather chaotically in all directions, carrying the cultural inheritance of Greek and Roman antiquity to all 4 points of the continent. This is in relation to the bloodline. The bloodline of Greek, European, and Western, it's not linear. Instead, it spread chaotically to the 4 points of the compass, right? So what's he talking about? The bloodline, tracing the bloodline of Western civilization to Greece, Rome, and Western civilization. That's not correct. This so-called drawing, when you draw your roots back to Western, to Roman and Greek culture, it's not straight. This inheritance, these roots are all over. The bloodline is spread to all the corners of the group, right? To illustrate the widespread diffusion of Greek and Roman cultural influence across the globe in all cardinal directions. That's exactly what he's talking about. That it's not a straight line. Greek and Roman cultural influences are there all over the world. 4 corners of the globe. Okay, 4 cardinal directions. 4 points of the compass becomes 4 cardinal directions. So that's the answer. Let's quickly look at B, C, and D. To emphasize the haphazard and unpredictable dissemination. He talks about the spread of Greek and Roman culture to all 4 points of the globe, but he does not use these adjectives haphazard, unpredictable. That is out of scope of the passage. To highlight the extensive reach of Greek and Roman cultural legacies, true, stretching to every corner of the known world, that is a little extreme. 4 corners, it's gone east, west, south, far east, but not every corner of the known world. That's extreme. To depict the chaotic and uncontrolled transmission, again, this part is not implied. Therefore, the correct answer is A. Which of the following could be the most logically plausible reason behind the misunderstandings as referred to in the second paragraph? The misunderstandings accumulate, misunderstandings about Western culture. What is the reason that the misunderstandings increased? The dominant European narrative is that Renaissance sought to revive classical traditions, which led to the biased portrayal of the preceding era as a dark age of backwardness and barbarism. Is he talking about the misunderstanding regarding the Renaissance and what the Renaissance did? No. The limited knowledge and understanding of the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic world, and East and Western Europe resulted in misconceptions about their cultural achievement. Did he say Europe did not understand the cultural achievements of the Islamic world and the others? Has not been mentioned in the passage. The fall of the Roman Empire and the subsequent fragmentation of Europe. What did that happen? When that happened, what happened? Parts of culture were lost, parts of it were preserved, parts of it was transformed into a radically new culture, which led to misunderstandings. So the correct answer is C.